Hello and welcome back to Immigrantly. I am Sadia Khan. And for those joining us for the first time, Immigrantly is a space for honest narratives that don't neatly fit into boxes or bend to be palatable. It's so good to be back here with all of you. Although I don't know many of you personally, may have never met you, but we share a kindred spirit. I share more of my thoughts and vulnerabilities with you than otherwise. And I know you get it. There's something beautiful about connecting through the immigrant identity. You could be from anywhere in the world, literally, and we share this bond. Or maybe you were born in the US to immigrant parents, or you're married to an immigrant. However, it happened, we are connected. And as a community, I know I can count on you. So here's my ask. If you haven't tried our app, Belong on Your Own Terms, I would love for you to subscribe to it. It's something I poured my heart into. A safe space for reflection and uncovering who you really are without shrinking parts of yourself. The link is studio.com/Sadia, SAADIA, or you can find it in the show notes. And let me know what works for you. The app is behind a paywall, but I know you'll subscribe because you believe in us. And you know we care for you. And today I am absolutely thrilled to sit down with Becca Ramos, an award-winning supervising producer at iHeartMedia, who's been the creative force behind hit shows like Las Culturistas. I know you wrote this one. This is Important, Mess, and the Daily Zeitgeist. And now she is the host and creator of Welcome to El Barrio.
Are we rolling? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You're tuned in to Welcome to El Barrio. Dale. I'm Becca Ramos, and this is Welcome to El Barrio, a podcast bringing you Puerto Rican history, news, and pop culture with one mission: to bridge the diaspora, especially for those who have ever felt ni de aquí, ni de allá. You may
a proud Puerto Rican who spent her career behind the mic, making space for the voices that matter. Becca is now stepping into her own spotlight, bringing the barrio and all its complexity, culture, and unapologetic truth to podcast listeners everywhere. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Welcome, Becca, to Immigrantly. So excited to have you here. How was the morning commute?
I live off the AC, and every day is different. If it's going to be on time, if it's going to be delayed. Sometimes you're on it, it gets on time, and then all of a sudden you're at one stop, and it's like, we're going to be here for 10 minutes. You're like, cool. It's not like I had somewhere to be on time.
It's so interesting. I feel like if you call yourself a New Yorker and you haven't been on subways frequently, then you're lying to yourself. And the funny thing is, I live in the burbs. I would like to think I live in New York City. I don't, unfortunately.
Where do you live?
I live in Westchester County.
Okay,
So
yeah.
There's a town in Westchester County where I live. But I still want to be known as a New Yorker, and I don't ride subways, which is terrible, right? So my goal is to start riding subways more, but for that I'll have to take Metro North into the city, which I don't because I drive and I call all my relatives in Pakistan when I'm driving and I talk to them. That's my
Commute.
Yeah, 45, 50 minutes.
When I used to live in Texas, because I'm from Texas originally, I would do that. Like I would have probably because I interned for a summer in Dallas, worst summer of my life. And the commute to work was only like 30 minutes. I wasn't very far from my office, but the traffic on the way back was so bad that it was like an hour and a half to 2 hours that I would just be calling everybody because it's like, what else am I going to do? 2 hours.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you grew up in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been. Have an interesting idea of what Houston may look like. And there's a lot of, contradiction and dichotomy. On the one hand, I think it's a very diverse city.
Yes.
Right? On the other hand, I feel like diversity and belonging in Houston is probably different from how it is in New York.
Oh, 100%.
Is that true?
Night and day. And I would just say that's probably general for the South. And because I've lived in many places at this point. I grew up in Houston. I went to college in Waco. I've lived in Austin. I've lived in Dallas. And then I have moved to Portland, Oregon. So I lived in the West Coast.
Oh, wow.
And my family is from LA. So I've dabbled in LA. And then now I've been in New York for 6 years. So I've kind of hit everywhere but the Midwest. In Houston, in Texas specifically, much like I think akin to what people describe LA like, it is segregated. It's like, yes, numbers-wise, it is one of the most diverse cities in the country, but there's lots of redlining. So, you have neighborhoods that are very black and brown, and then you have neighborhoods that are very white. And it is very difficult to cross over. So I went to a high school that was probably 30, 40% POC, 60, 70% white. And I went to a huge school. My high school was 3,000 kids. But also it's segregated by education level. So it's if you're in upper level, the smarter, gifted classes, it's mainly white. And if you're in the underserved classes, that's where all the black and brown students are. So it's yes, the split was maybe 60-40, but my split growing up was me one of the only.
And how is it different in New York?
I feel in New York, it's inseparable. It is a diverse city anywhere you go. And obviously there are, you go to Upper West, Upper East, it's yeah, of course there's money. But if you're in Queens, if you're in any of the boroughs, you're going to find giant communities of color and not just one. It's so diverse in community wherever you go. I'm walking around and you're meeting people of all sorts. You're listening to all different languages as you're walking past. There's no ownership of yes, there are neighborhoods that are historically certain communities, but it's not this ownership that it's oh, you can't come in here.
And you're absolutely right about the languages. Now, unfortunately, in Westchester, you hear just one language.
Yes.
But the minute I am in New York, there will be people speaking multiple languages, and it is so beautiful. Talking about languages, what is America's obsession with one language? What is going on, America? Tell me, Becca, why are they so fixated?
I think it's racism, right? Because everything goes down to racism, but especially with language, it's silly because historically the United States in our government documents do not have a noted language.
Yes.
There is not the national language is English. And I know when Donald Trump first was in office, 2016, I think he tried to change it, but it's still, to this day, we're 2026, 10 years later, it's not changed. There is no official language of the United States. Yes, English is our dominant language, but there is no official language. And I think it's because English as a language is most heavily aligned with European-centric countries and white-centric countries, Anglo-centric countries, if we want to be politically correct. And so the United States affiliation with whiteness being the dominant culture, they are so aligned with having English be the dominant language, which is silly because if we take it all the way back, this is a country that was colonized. It's literally called the 13 colonies, and it's because the British came and they were this is ours now. They're not even supposed to be here.
And you have people from so many different ethnicities and cultures. I say this all the time. You have almost 90 million first and second gen immigrants and their kids. You have over 40 million Spanish-speaking people in this country. And this really feeds into what I want to talk about. Bad Bunny's halftime show. It was crazy.
It was so good.
And imagine people opting out of that and watching Kid Rock. Like, guys, seriously, like, at least have a better option or be consistent in your racism, right?
Well, they are consistent in their racism choosing Kid Rock.
That's true.
You know, I mean, who else would be willing to be on that stage, especially rivaling Bad Bunny?
That's true.
It's like, I don't think any white artist, non-racist, in parentheses, would want to choose to challenge to be up against Bad Bunny, seeing the run that he had in 2025. It was just undeniable, his cultural impact globally, not just on the United States or Puerto Rico at large. So it's like, yeah, no matter what, you might get paid, but it's like at what cost? Because no one's going to watch. It's undeniable that even before we even saw the performance, that people were going to tune in. Just like last year, given everything that was going on with Kendrick culturally, it's like, of course, people were going to tune in that moment because they wanted to see what Kendrick was going to bring to the table because he is historically an incredible performer. And at that time, you know, he was peak beef with Drake. Now, Bad Bunny coming in, all the buildup into this performance, given the political climate we're in about the, you know, war against immigrants here, and also just his run of putting Puerto Rico on the map unlike anyone before, people were going to tune in. And even if it was just because they wanted to see the controversy of it all. And then it was an incredible performance.
Buenas tardes, California. Mi nombre es Benito Antonio Martínez Ocasio. Y si hoy estoy aquí en el Super Bowl 60, es porque nunca dejé de creer en mí. Tú también deberías de creer en ti. Vales más de lo que piensas.
I know I'm biased as someone who is Puerto Rican, but I do think as a culture lover, as someone who works in culture, it was one of the best performances of the Super Bowl history, hands down.
I was so emotional watching that performance and just being an immigrant. And not that he's an immigrant, he's Puerto Rican, but the idea of seeing a different language on the grand scale that we saw, it was such an endearing watershed moment for everyone who's navigated multiple identities, right? What did you think of Lady Gaga as a parent?
Okay, so I have been doing some deep dive a little, or I shouldn't say deep, but I have done some digging because I was a little perplexed when I saw, because out of all the people he could have brought on, I was shocked that it was Lady Gaga. I am a Lady Gaga fan. I love her. But I was like, he's never collaborated with her before, you know, because Cardi to me seemed like the most aligned.
Yes.
Because she does have a lot of English speaking songs.
And she was there.
She was there. There was a lot of illusion that it would be her. So when Lady Gaga popped up, I was like, whoa, that was confusing.
Mientras uno está vivo, uno debe amar lo más que pueda.
I had watched a video. I cannot, for the life of me, remember the creator off the top of my head right now. But she made this video saying that if you were listening very carefully to what Bad Bunny was saying in Spanish before Lady Gaga come on,
Dime, a tu es lo que tú querías.
Por el poder que se me otorga, los declaro marido y mujer. Pueden estar a la novia.
he basically says something to the T of, is this what you wanted? And then kind of like presented her on, and she sings a song in English. And I don't think that was a jab at her, because obviously he chose to bring her on and it was collaborative, and he is historically a fan of hers. She's been a big supporter of his career time and time again. But I think in that moment, it was more of a showcase to the US audience to be like, here you go. You guys wanted an American, you wanted English. I'm going to give you English, but it's going to be my way. And it's going to be a salsa version of this song. Also, that song is a song she did with Bruno Mars, who is half Puerto Rican. I thought that was interesting. She wouldn't just bring on Bruno Mars, but yo no sé, I don't know. But yeah, that is, to me, my original conclusion before I saw that take. And I was like, okay, I can accept and respect that take, was maybe it was the choice of that groom and bride, because it was a real wedding. So I was like, maybe this was like their dream wedding. Maybe that is their wedding song. It is a love song. So maybe, you know, he pulled some strings. Who knows? We'll never know unless Lady Gaga says why.
Yeah, that's a good description, because if that is the case, then it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, it did not make sense to a lot of people. And to me, again, I don't understand Spanish, but for me, it was like, hey, are we making it palatable for the white audience, right? Because it was like, why would you bring her?
Dime, esto es lo que tú querías. Yo soy fino, esto es trap de galería. Tú eres un charro, Rocky de aquí, una porquería. Yo un campeón, Rocky Marciano, Rocky Balboa, Rocky Balbía. Tengo la ruta, tengo la vía, sí, tengo la vía. Los gastos de noche facturo todo el día.
You're a proud Puerto Rican.
I'm very proud Puerto Rican.
Becca, for people, which is unfortunate. I feel like as an immigrant, there's so much that I don't know.
Yeah.
Because America exports a certain brand of PR and information through Hollywood and songs. Growing up in Pakistan, I was exposed to a certain brand of Americanness. And it's ironic if you ask somebody living in Pakistan, and I'm sure it's true for other countries, what is an American? How do you define an American? It would unfortunately be blonde, blue-eyed person. But the reality is America is so diverse.
Absolutely.
And it is so beautiful. And Puerto Rico is part of America. So for those listeners who still don't know, give me a history lesson of sorts, just 101.
So I will say, for my show, my podcast, Welcome to a Barrio, I am also on this journey to learn more about Puerto Rico. I think it is purposely designed by the American education system to keep everybody in the dark about what's going on in Puerto Rico. Because I think if more people truly understand what was happening over there, they would be appalled that we are still in this limbo relationship with the United States. Because in the end of the day, it's a colony. Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States, just like Guam is, just like the Philippines was. It is a colony. The way that Puerto Rico was incorporated into the United States, we are considered an unincorporated territory. The reason we were considered an unincorporated territory is that when Puerto Rico was given to the United States as a consolation prize in the Spanish-American War from Spain, basically Spain lost the war, and they're like, here, we give you Puerto Rico. And the Puerto Rican people had just won their freedom from Spain. We thought, we're free. And then all of a sudden, the United States comes in and they're like, no, you're ours. And we were like, huh? And through that, Puerto Ricans have such a history of, I think, rebellion and fighting for their own freedom in any way that they can, despite time and time again being attacked. But I say all this to say, when I think it was with the Jones Act, Puerto Rico becomes an unincorporated territory, which in the language of the U.S. doctrine, it states that we are too savage of a people to be incorporated. That is the difference between an incorporated territory and an unincorporated territory. And it really was a lot of racist language used to describe the Puerto Rican people because we were Black and brown. And therefore, they were like, you're too savage. We don't want you to be a part of the United States, but we want to own you. So it is literally written to belong to, but not a part of in the legal doctrine. So we've always had a second-class citizenship, which is why I think the conversation about what it means to be Puerto Rican in relation to the United States is so complicated because, yes, we are U.S. citizens not by our desire or choice. It was for the benefit of the United States to give us U.S. citizenship because we were fighting World War I for them. That's the reason they gave us U.S. citizenship. They were like, we need bodies. So you are bodies that are disposable to us. So we will give you citizenship so we can send you abroad to be bodies for us to dispose of.
It's true even now.
Yeah.
We see that in the U.S. Army.
Yes. The U.S. Army preys upon the lower class with this conversation as someone from Texas who had Army stations up at school that were preying on kids from lower incomes to come and find a better life and get education. But in reality, they're never going to be the West Point kids. They are the kids that are on the front lines. They are not the ones gaining an education. They're the ones putting their lives on the lines, which is why also the veteran conversation is hard because people are like, these are our soldiers, and yet they can't get healthcare, and yet they can't get mental health services. They, are dying in our U.S. healthcare system when they come back from war, even though we have put them in this pious position as like the people defending our country. But in reality, the ones that are defending our country are the ones who are most disenfranchised, which is its own conversation. But yes, Puerto Rico's always had a second-class citizenship. Puerto Rican citizens have been stripped of many rights. We can't vote. We do not have representation. I think we do in Congress, but not by our own electoral college. Like, we don't get to elect those officials. They're appointed to us. So those people do not have our best interests in mind because we are not appointing them. And on top of that, throughout the Industrial Revolution, many ways the U.S. has looked at Puerto Rico as this kind of experimental ground of how can we exploit it, through taxes, through financial gain, through experimenting with weapons, through experimenting on the women's bodies, through birth control testing. There's just so many ways that Puerto Rico has been exploited for U.S. gain. And to this day, yes, we have citizenship. Yes, we are a part of the United States. We are really in belonging of the United States, not a part of. It's complicated, which is why I think it was such a statement for Bad Bunny to go on the biggest U.S. stage, the Super Bowl, and be like, I am Puerto Rican. I'm not Puerto Rican American. I am Puerto Rican, and I speak Spanish because that is the dominant language in Puerto Rico, not English. And I think in Puerto Rico, it is actually the designated language in Puerto Rico is Spanish.
You grew up in Houston, though. So do you identify as Puerto Rican American then?
No, I identify as Puerto Rican. And I think
interesting.
In a different time in my life, I would have said Puerto Rican American, but I am for the liberation of Puerto Rico. And I am 100% Puerto Rican. Both of my parents are Puerto Rican. And yes, I grew up in the United States, but I think I, as a Puerto Rican person, as a Afro-Latina, I am visibly very much a Black Afro-Puerto Rican. It's hard for me to say I am Puerto Rican American. I think when you look at what's going on in Puerto Rico and you are for the support and freedom of Puerto Rico, it's hard for me to be like, and see what's going on in America, for me to be proud as a Puerto Rican American. Puerto Rican first.
So what does liberation look like for Puerto Rico? Because you've talked about liberation, right? You're all for liberation.
Yes.
But what form do you envision that liberation in?
I mean, I think I saw an article come out after the Super Bowl halftime show. I think it might have been from Time magazine. I didn't get to finish reading it, but essentially it was saying if we are going to be holding Puerto Rico in this position, they deserve their freedom. And I think freedom for Puerto Rico looks like a representation in terms of their own government, their own decision-making power, what happens on that island. And I think it is separating us as a colony of the United States. Like, it is truly like no more ownership of the United States. I think a lot of people who are afraid of liberation are like, well, we're going to be in so much debt because Puerto Rico has become this tax haven for the United States. The United States has exported a lot of their debt onto Puerto Rico. So we are considered one of the poorest countries in the world. But I just had a conversation on my podcast with Jorel Menendez Barrio and Aurora Santiago Ortiz. They're husband and wife, authors, historians, professors at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. And we had talked about this exact thing. And in reality, will that relationship with debt change because we are our own independent nation? That debt is in belonging to the United States. So would our debt be forgiven? Because I am not a finance person, but to me, from everything I've learned as an adult, it's all fake. You know, it's like we kind of make up what is debt and what isn't debt and who gets forgiven and who doesn't get forgiven. So to me, it's like we've created this fear mongering around the debt crisis in Puerto Rico. But in reality, I think the global world has a decision-making power on what that debt looks like for Puerto Rico. So I think it is independence from us financially so that we can make decisions about what is happening. It is deprivatizing the island. Right now, the entire energy grid is privatized, which is a big moment in the Bad Bunny Super Bowl where the power lines like break. It is a fuck you to Luma, who owns the power grid in Puerto Rico. And to this day, if you're living on the island, there's rolling blackouts. There is no stable energy on the island. There's no stable internet on the island. All the time, I'm on calls with my producer who lives in Puerto Rico, and it's like no stable internet, no stable electricity. I visited, and it's like, doesn't matter if it's hurricane season or not, it's just not stable. There's like a little bit of rain, and like pockets of the whole country are just out. So I think it's deprivatizing the island. It's giving representation back to the people. It's letting the people decide what's best for them.
What are your thoughts on statehood, like 51st state? Because a lot of people float that idea as well.
Yes. So I think if you're for liberation of Puerto Rico, you're anti-statehood. And I think for a long time before I was more educated, and once again, my podcast is all about bringing that education to the forefront. I am still very much learning, and I want to like make note that everything I'm saying is coming from the mouths of professors I've learned from, books I've read. I am not the end-all be-all of the source, and also the facts. If I'm messing them up, please do your own research. I am not a professor. I am just someone who is deeply passionate about our culture. But I say all that to say, I think statehood is a lofty dream. It's like almost like the American dream. The American dream, the U.S. has sold to its lower income class. I think statehood is that for Puerto Rico, where it's this carrot the United States dangles over Puerto Rico about, well, if we just make you a state, things will get better. But it does not behoove the United States to give Puerto Rico statehood, because then the United States has to absorb the debt.
Yeah.
And they're never going to absorb that debt.
So you think the promise is never going to come through?
It's never going to come through, because I think Puerto Rican citizens have, like, those that are in favor of statehood have pushed for it. And it has been like a decision that's been pushed back and back and back with the United States government over and over and over again. I was like, if the United States wanted to, it would have. Almost like a boyfriend, right? If he wanted to, he would have. And I think that is also a conversation with Bad Bunny's song Hawaii. It's literally about that. It is an anti-statehood anthem.
Ella se ve bonita, que a veces le vaya mal. En los ojos una sonrisa, aguantándose llorar.
Basically, what happened to Hawaii is what could happen to Puerto Rico if Puerto Rico becomes a state, right? It is stripped of its culture. The history is gone. I visited Hawaii many, many moons ago, 2018, and I remember going to Maui and like going to museums and like reading the history and being like, there's no way this is how it happened. Because it is this U.S. revisionist history of being like, no, it wasn't that bad. We didn't harm the people. We didn't murder them. We didn't colonize them. We didn't strip them of their culture. They wanted this. And
it's always that.
It's always
that.
And that is what would happen, I think, if Puerto Rico becomes a state. I don't think the power grid will get better, because look at Texas. Texas has a privatized power grid, and it's bad. So similarly, I think there would be just different bad hardships if we became a state. And I don't think the Puerto Rican people will feel that freedom. And I don't think they'll feel any better being a U.S. state.
I want to pivot to your podcast. Welcome to El Barrio. What does it mean?
Welcome to El Barrio is, I named it that because the Spanglish of it all. As someone who did not grow up speaking Spanish, I'm a no sabo kid myself. My parents both speak Spanish, but I think in a form of assimilation and kind of preservation and security, they did not teach us because I grew up in Texas and it's very racist. And there are lots of paths Texas kind of inhibits on native speakers, like ESL programs that kind of are purposely designed to bring these kids down a level so that they are not as smart or educated as the other kids. So I kind of did this play on Spanglish because I wanted it to feel like if you are someone who is speaking Spanish, if you're someone who's speaking English, it's for everybody in the diaspora. You are welcome. And this is for you. It is a podcast by and for Puerto Ricans. Every touch point has been Puerto Rican. My whole team is Puerto Rican. I was very intentional that I wanted this to be for our community, by our community, and just a space for us to feel like we can learn and grow together and bridge the diaspora. Because there is a lot of resentment, I think, between the island and United States Puerto Ricans because our experiences are so different. I think those on the island have the more authentic Puerto Rican culture because they're there, but they have those hardships that I was just noting. And those of us in the stateside, our families did not have the privilege to stay. A lot of them fled because they could not have a sustainable life on the island. So we have a better life in the United States, but at the cost of our culture. So I think each one of us is wanting something from the other. You know, those on the island want the stability and the privilege those in the States have, but those in the States want the authenticity and the culture that the island gives, that those who live there have. And so this was my attempt to bridge this gap and to say we're stronger together and we cannot fight for liberation of Puerto Rico without each other.
Do you ever feel the guilt of having grown up in Houston instead of Puerto Rico?
Oh, yeah.
The privileges that you've had versus people in Puerto Rico?
I feel guilt, yes, but I also feel this like sense of longing more than I think guilt, because I wouldn't say my upbringing was like privilege. I grew up very poor. You know, my family, it was rough for many, many years. I don't remember financial stability till I was in high school, probably. So it wasn't like I had this like grandiose life. And I also experienced like different types of racism. I am Afro-Latina. I did not understand that being in Texas. And I did experience racism not only within the white community, but also the other like Latin diaspora, right? Like Texas is very Central American and Mexican. And with that, they would be like, well, you're Black, so you're not one of us. So there was this tension of like, okay, I'm too Black to be Latino and I don't speak Spanish, but I'm also not, I'm too brown and Black to be white. So I'm just kind of in this limbo where it's like in my home, it was very culturally Puerto Rican. But the second I stepped outside, I was very Black. And I lived this very complex identity that I did not understand for many, many years until I left Texas and I got to explore it in other places and find a community of color that really welcomed and accepted me and let me grow into my identity. So I don't feel guilt in that way, but I do feel this like, I'm not Puerto Rican enough. And I do think that was a big part of making the show was me being like, I'm trying to be as Puerto Rican as possible. I'm trying to like learn how to be Puerto Rican.
From whatever little research I've done, barrio also means neighborhood, right?
Yes.
It has a strong connotation.
Mm-hmm.
Whose story from your family or your barrio are you holding when you have those conversations with your guests?
Yes, I would say it's a culmination of my whole family history, right? I have such a unique experience being a Boricua in Texas and then also going to a white school and all this stuff. But I also like can't say that my mom's own upbringing doesn't impact me or my dad's upbringing doesn't impact me because my mother grew up in Puerto Rico. She is a Puerto Rican Boricua through and through and grew up between Puerto Rico, California, and New York. Like she moved to the United States when she was in high school. And then even though growing up in Puerto Rico before high school, she would live between summers in New York, life in Puerto Rico, because my abuela is a New Yorican. She grew up in New York, Spanish Harlem, New Yorican. But my dad is from LA. And so he has a very different relationship to his experience. So I feel like all of these stories are a culmination of my barrio and my unique perspective. I hold all these different cards. And I use that to bring out these stories of my guests because I'm like, a huge central part of the show is like, I can't be the only one who feels this way. I can't be the only Boricua that's like in this depth of longing, who has been removed from her culture, but not by choice, and wanting to reconnect. And so I hope with my perspective and my empathy that I can bring these stories out of people so that people feel less alone.
Are there any conversations about Puerto Rican identity that you're just tired of having? And as a Muslim immigrant, I can tell you, I am so fucking tired of proving how nice we are and we are not terrorists and not all Muslim women are oppressed. And I'm like, fuck you if you still think that way, because then you're ignorant.
Yeah.
Is there something that you're like, fuck you, I am not going to explain myself anymore?
Ooh, that is a great question. I feel like the biggest hardship I experienced probably growing up was the obvious spicy Latina trope, but also that being wrapped in anti-Black racism. Because as an Afro-Latina, I feel like I would experience this racism of men being like, ugh, you're Black. And then I'd be like, because of my own internalized shit of what I've learned being projected onto me, I'm like, no, I'm not Black, I'm Puerto Rican. And then they'd be like, ooh, like, then you're spicy, you're hot. And then it was just gross no matter what.
Yeah.
And it is just this crux of a thing where it's like, I am allowed to be fiery. I'm allowed to be loud. I'm allowed to be bodacious and, you know, kooky in my own way. But that doesn't mean I am this caricature that the American media has portrayed onto Latin America in general, especially Boricuas. You know, you have your J-Lo, or I would even say just J-Lo. It's like, you think Sofia Vergara, you think, you know, Eva Longoria. Like, there's like this very specific type of Latina that the U.S. entertainment system has put into display. And I would like to dispel
the palatable
that.
one.
Yes. I would like to dispel that. We're not just hot and loud. You know, we have a lot of depth and complexity to us.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, every ethnicity, every community, every religion, every identity has so much depth and breadth, and they are not a monolith.
Yes.
And somehow, American mainstream media fails to acknowledge that. And they continue doing it. Like, I'm like, when will you learn? In addition to your own podcast, you have produced big shows.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned in those rooms where you knew that you would do something differently, or you were bringing your own sense of selfhood to those conversations? What were the most challenging parts and some of the most endearing moments?
Yeah, so I work in comedy primarily, right? So it was kind of a big venture to do this show that isn't comedy. I am not a comedian by trade, but, you know, I work on some of the biggest comedy podcasts in the industry right now. And I love comedy. Comedy has always been something that I am very drawn to. So it was not a shock that I ended up in comedy podcasting to me. But I say that all to say that when I started this venture for my own show, I was like, okay, when I'm looking at the landscape of Puerto Rican media, so to speak, I feel like, or Latin American media, so to speak, I would say there's like this caricaturization. I call it the Telemundo transatlantic accent, where it's like this idea that like the US has of what Latinos are. And it's like this specific voice that generalizes all of Latin America and this specific tone and this look and this feel. And I was like, I'm not that. I am a very complex person. I grew up in the South, but I'm very Black and I'm very Latino and I live in New York. Like, I'm not that. I'm not this. I didn't grow up on Telemundo, to be quite honest. And also, though, I feel like on the other end, you have that caricature of Latin America, but then you also have, when it comes to Puerto Rican media specifically, it's usually very sad and it's very serious. From the landscape I was looking at in terms of podcasts and other things to listen to, I was like, I'm not that person. I work in comedy. I'm never going to be able to handle this subject with like deep seriousness. That's not to say we won't cover serious topics, but I wanted this to feel warm and inviting because that's the type of person I am and that's the type of work I create. So that was something I feel like I bridged both of these gaps of like the work I've learned through comedy podcasts, but then also my own desires of my goals for the show, bridging this gap of infotainment, so to speak.
How does your comedy experience show up in your podcast?
I think it shows up in sometimes when I choose a promo. I kind of made some fun trailer that was like me doing this kind of newscaster bit of what the show will be. And then I think some of the clips I pick, but also I think how I choose to interview. I think I am very engaging. I think I'm very excitable and interested in the fun parts of people's lives, not just the sad experience that is Puerto Rico, but also I think to be Latin and to be Puerto Rican is a lot of fun. I think our culture brings a lot of joy. And I think that was very evident in Bad Bunny show, even though it was this very serious album that he made that was a very big protest album to a degree of being like, we are Puerto Rican, we're here and we're not going anywhere and I want Puerto Rico to be free. It also is a lot of fun. You're seeing perreo. You've seen Bad Bunny on SNL. Like he is a fun and funny person. And I think that is Puerto Rico in a nutshell, where it's like we are fun, we are funny, we are lively, we have so much joy despite the trauma.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the irony is going back to this idea of how America defines anything that's not the dominant population. It's always siloed in trauma, tragedy, or triumph. And that triumph is always linked to the American dream. You've made it.
Yes.
You've achieved it, right? And the messy, human, crazy, humorous side of our existence is somehow wiped out, right?
Yes.
And that's what all of us are trying to navigate and build on and say, look, we can be funny.
Yes.
We can say things that may surprise you other than what you think we are or who we are and how our life experiences have shaped us. What is the biggest surprise so far through this process? What did you discover that you were like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have known?
I think the biggest thing I have discovered when it comes to Puerto Rico at large, or just like doing this podcast, has been how much people wanted this. So many beautiful, lovely messages from people being like, I'm so grateful this exists. I'm so grateful that there is somewhere that I can like learn about Puerto Rico, feel belonging, all that stuff. And also how down people are. I think Puerto Ricans, because we are such a small island, it's a really tight-knit community. Like once you start actually investing in your community, you're like, wow, it actually is a small world. It's a small circle. Everybody really does know each other and everybody wants to support one another. It's not like this like, oh, only one of us can be the voice of Puerto Rico. It's like, oh my God, you're doing something? Bet. Like, how can we help? And that has been so much more than I could have ever asked for because it's all I've ever wanted. And I didn't know it was possible.
You know, what's strange to me, I've been doing Immigrantly as a podcast for quite some time. And now we have a bunch of podcasts. I sometimes feel like because Immigrantly is focused on the immigrant identity in whatever form it comes, right? First, second gen, third gen, whatever. I feel like the community part is a bit orphaned in some ways because every community lives in their own bubble.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that through your podcast, while you're telling stories of Puerto Ricans, you're also not living in your own echo chamber? Or is that something that doesn't bother you?
That is a great question. I had never really thought about that. I guess what I have been trying to express in the interviews I've done is a tone that is trying to welcome, obviously, the POV is by and for Puerto Ricans. it is for us first. But I do want to make it very clear that this is for anybody wanting to learn about Puerto Rico, because it is so important, considering Puerto Rico's legal status within the United States, that if you are specifically a U.S. citizen, not just a Puerto Rican, but a U.S. citizen at large, you know what's happening in Puerto Rico because your vote affects them. You have more say on what's going on in Puerto Rico than Puerto Ricans do.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I have tried to, with every interview I've done, really push that to audience members or listeners, really, to say, hey, like, yes, this is from the perspective of Puerto Ricans. This is for Puerto Ricans. But this is for anybody who's interested in history, news, pop culture, music, anything, because it is your job as just like it's our job to know what's going on in Palestine, to know what's going on in Venezuela, to know what's going on in the world. It's your job to know what's going on in Puerto Rico.
It's all based on human experiences at the end of the day.
Yes.
And we are more similar than we are different. And even if we are different, it's okay to be different.
Yes, which is, I think, what Bad Bunny's Super Bowl performance showcased, but also the messages I've received from other people in the Latin diaspora, not just the Puerto Rican diaspora, being like, I'm Mexican, I related to this story so much, I grew up somewhere XYZ, and I really appreciate you sharing these stories.
And in the end, Becca, if you were to define the United States of America in a word or a sentence, how would you do that?
A nation built by immigrants.
You're going to give a lot of people a heart attack today. The right is going to explode and implode.
I know, but Hamilton said it over a decade ago, and that's the most palatable thing to the centrists. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not the first, baby. Lyndon said it first.
Where can people find the podcast?
You can find Welcome to a Barrio on anywhere you listen to podcasts. Our Instagram is at Welcome to a Barrio. My personal Instagram is Becks, Beccs Ramos. And we have Substack, wteb.substack.com, which you can find on our Instagram page. All the links are there. But yeah, I'm trying to post on the Substack. I know I haven't yet in a while, but I'm trying to get 2 to 4 posts out a month that are just kind of bonus content to add fervor to the episodes I make. And yeah.
I love it. And Substack is a tough one. I recently started my Substack and
it's overwhelming for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I'm posting things that once I post them, then I'm like, should I have posted them? And then I'm like, it's okay. This is my catharsis. Thank you so much for coming. This was wonderful.
Thank you for having me. This was so lovely.
I get it. When I am in the studio with my guests, the conversation flow lands different. It's so effortless. And I love the fact that I can sit across from my guest and engage in a meaningful conversation. And this interview, because it was done in the studio, was delightful. I hope you guys enjoyed this. There's a lot of information about Puerto Rico for those of you who are still confused. And there's a lot of humor, honesty, vulnerability, which is in line with how Immigrantly rolls, right? If you liked this episode, please do share. Give it a 5-star review on Apple. Just click on those 5 stars. Or if you want to write something nice, please do. I read each and every review. This podcast episode was produced and written by me, Sadia Khan. The editorial review is done by Shay Yu. Our sound designer and editor is Lou Raskin. Immigrantly's theme music is by Simon Hutchinson. Other music by Epidemic Sound. I'll see you next week. Until then, take care.